The Silent Letter. Evelyn sat at her desk, the dim light of the old lamp casting long shadows across the room. Her fingers hesitated over the paper, the pen poised but unmoving. The silence around her was almost oppressive, yet she welcomed it. There was something about the stillness of the night that allowed her to think clearly, to face the things she had been avoiding for so long. The letter she was about to write had been in her mind for weeks, perhaps even months. It wasn't the first time she had tried to write it. She'd started and stopped more times than she cared to count. There was always something that held her back, an unspoken fear, a memory that made the words feel heavy and insurmountable. Taking a deep breath, she finally began to write. Dear Lucas, as she paused, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. It had been years since she had written to him, years since she had even spoken to him. The pain of their last conversation, the words that were left unsaid, still haunted her. They had parted in anger, a misunderstanding that neither of them had been able to mend. And so, the years passed, silence stretching between them like an insurmountable chasm. But tonight, for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt compelled to write. I don't know where to begin. Her pen hovered above the page as memories flooded her mind. The laughter they had shared, the long walks along the beach, the dreams they had built together, and then the day it all fell apart. Her chest tightened at the thought. The words had been harsh, sharp, cutting deeper than either of them had anticipated. What started as a simple disagreement had spiraled into something neither of them had been able to undo. Evelyn paused again, staring at the paper. She wanted to say so much, but words felt inadequate. What could she say to bridge the years of silence? What could she say to repair the damage? The pen in her hand trembled slightly as she dipped it back into the ink. I've thought of you often. More than you know. Her hand moved almost instinctively now, the words flowing out of her as though they had been waiting for this moment. Each sentence carried the weight of years, of regret, of longing. I think about what we lost, and I wonder if it could have been different. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to send this, but I need you to know, I'm sorry. I wish I had said things differently, that I had listened more, that I hadn't let pride stand between us. The silence between us has been unbearable, and I don't know how to fix it, but I wanted you to know that I'm still here, still hoping for a chance to make things right. The words were raw, vulnerable, more than she had ever intended to say. And yet, there they were, spilling out onto the paper. Evelyn set the pen down, her hands shaking now. She could feel the weight of the letter, the enormity of what she had just written. It was one thing to think these thoughts, to carry them quietly in her heart. But to put them on paper, to say them out loud, even if just to herself, was something entirely different. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the letter. She hadn't signed it. Perhaps she wasn't ready to make that final decision. What if he didn't want to hear from her? What if the silence was his choice, his way of moving on? As if in response to her thoughts, a soft breeze stirred through the open window, fluttering the edges of the letter. She watched the paper move, and for a moment, it felt as though the letter were alive, breathing, as if it, too, were waiting for something. Evelyn let out a long, slow breath. She had spent so many years wondering if this moment would ever come, if she would ever have the strength to confront the past, to break the silence. She had no answers, no guarantees. But in this moment, she knew one thing for certain: she had finally let go of the fear. The fear of rejection, of regret, of not being enough. She had written the letter not because she expected anything in return, but because she needed to. For herself, a soft knock on the door broke her reverie. Evelyn looked up, startled, to find her neighbor, Mrs. Hale, standing in the doorway, holding a letter in her hand. The elderly woman smiled warmly, her face kind yet curious. "I hope I'm not interrupting, dear," Mrs. Hale said gently, stepping into the room. "But I thought you might want to know that I found this in my mailbox. It was addressed to you, but it was mixed up with my mail. I'm sure it's important." Evelyn took the letter from Mrs. Hale's hand, her heart skipping a beat. It was a letter from Lucas. She stared at the envelope, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She had written her own letter, the one she'd never expected to send. And now, here was his. With trembling fingers, she tore open the envelope. Her eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, and her breath caught in her throat. "Dear Evelyn, I've thought of you often, more than I can say. The years without you have been a quiet kind of ache. I've been wondering if I'll ever be able to find the words to reach you again, but I had to try. I've missed you. I'm sorry, too. I was wrong. There are so many things I wish I had done differently, things I regret. But the silence between us has been unbearable, and I don't know how to fix it either. I'm here, Evelyn. I've always been here, waiting for the chance to make things right." Her hands shook as she read the words over and over, as though trying to believe them, to make sense of the impossible truth. The letter fell from her hands, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe. The silence between them was broken. And in that moment, Evelyn knew the past, though it could never be undone, was finally beginning to heal.